Okay, so now chapter 4, probably my favorite chapter all year. This is where we did equations and inequalities. Now, we've been seeing a lot of equations lately, so it shouldn't be hard to go back and remember how these work, but we're going to go through them anyway. There were a lot of lessons in this chapter, but we're going to go through them pretty quickly because they kind of blend and they're the same thing, just with different operations. So we're going to start with 4.1, which was solving equations with addition and subtraction. So remember, when you're solving an equation, you want to solve for that variable. You want to get that variable by itself. And so far, we've only been doing equations where we can solve for one variable at a time. When you get to algebra 1, you'll be able to solve for two variables. Right now, we're only doing one. So that's our p. We want to solve for our p. We want to get our p by itself. So remember, we're going to do the inverse operation. Right now, the operation that is with the p minus a 3 or a negative 3. You can say it either way. You'd end up doing it the same way. Since we have a negative 3, to cancel it out, we will add 3 to both sides. That cancels it out, so you just have p left over here. And whatever you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other side. So negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. That is our answer there. Let's do another one. Let's say we have b minus 19. Well, we just did a subtraction one. Let's do an addition one. Let's switch it up. Let's say I have negative 2 plus b equals negative 22. All right, so again, we want the b by itself, so we need to get rid of this. So even though this is an addition problem, it's negative 2 plus b, you notice we need to get rid of the negative 2, so we're still going to add 2 to both sides of the equation. We're left with b over here. Negative 22 plus 2 would give us negative 20. There you go. Addition and subtraction, all you do is watch, see what the operation is, do the opposite. So now, let's say we're going to go on to lesson 4.2, and it's the same idea. When you're doing equations, you're just going to do the opposite. So now we have multiplication and division. Let's say that I have x over 3 equals negative 8. Again, we want to get this x by itself. So right now we're dividing by 3, so we're going to multiply both sides by 3. To cancel this out, we're left with x equals negative 8 times 3. Remember, different signs, negative 24. Now, let's say then that I had a multiplication one. Let's say I had 4x equals negative 8. Still want to get that x by itself. Right now we're multiplying by 4, so we're going to divide both sides by 4. Cancels out. We're left with x equals negative, because they're different signs, 2. There you go. Okay, then we get into typically just so you have to do two different operations here. Sorry about that audio jump really quickly. All right, so for example, let's say I have negative 2c plus 6 equals negative 8. So we're still solving an equation. We still want that variable. We want to figure out what that c is. But we got to get rid of these other numbers, this negative 2 and this plus 6. Remember, you have to get rid of the number that is not attached to the variable before you touch the variable. So that's going to be the 6. It's a positive 6, so we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. That'll give us negative 2c equals negative 14. Now we need to get rid of our negative 2. We're multiplying it right now. Don't get confused by the negative sign. We're still multiplying it by the c. That crosses out. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. We have same signs over here, so it's going to be a positive 7. All right, we can do another one. Let's say we have, let's say we have 5 minus 4t equals 6. Remember, before we can touch the thing attached to the variable, we want to get rid of the 5, so it's a positive 5. Subtract 5 from both sides. We're left with negative 4t equals 1. Divide both sides by negative 4. You can leave this as negative 1/4, or you can put it as negative 0.25. One more. I want to remind you about the parentheses we have going on. So what if we had something like this? Remember in the last chapter, chapter 3 we just reviewed, when you have parentheses, you cannot add or subtract anything until you get rid of those parentheses first. So we would distribute that 1. So when you have a number right next to parentheses like this, that means that you're going to have to distribute, which is just multiplying by each term. So before I can start solving, I have to distribute my 3. That is going to give me 9w minus 12 equals negative 20. Now I can start solving things. Get rid of that 12, left with 9. Oops. It shouldn't be that way. 9w equals negative 8. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 9. You can leave your answer as negative 8/9. So that is lesson 3. Lesson 4 was all about inequalities now. Remember, this is where you have to graph because it's going to have either that greater than or less than an equal to sign. So we're starting with just being able to write them. So, for example, if it says a number w is greater than negative 3. This is one of the things you'll have to do. So the number is w, and it's greater than negative 3. Remember, the opening goes to the number that's greater than. All right? If I wanted to say w was greater than and equal to negative 3, put a line underneath it, right? If I wanted to say w was less than negative 3, just switch the sign. All right, simple. So remembering how to graph it now. Let's say we have q is greater than negative 1.3. So I'm going to have my number line, right? I'm going to put a 0 in there. And I want negative 1.3. So we know that's negative 1, that's negative 2. We'll say negative 1.3 is about here. All right? Now, q is greater than it, which means my line's going to go this way. Now I just need to determine if my circle is open or closed. Open circles are for things that are greater than or less than. Closed circles are for if it's greater than and less than and equal to. So it's an open circle because this does not include the 1.3. This is just the numbers that are greater than negative 1.3. All right? So remember that when you're graphing. So now, lesson 4.5. Was graphing after you solve. So let's say we have, I lost my place. Let's say we have d plus 12 is less than 19. And we have to solve this and then graph it. So again, we want d by itself. So we're going to subtract that 12. We're left with d is less than 7. Now we got to graph it. put my 0 on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's an open circle because there is no equal to. And it says D is the numbers less than 7. There you go. Solving graph. Now, lesson 4.6 was also solving graph, but it added division and multiplication. Now remember, when you're dividing or multiplying inequalities, if you use a negative number, you have to switch the sign, okay? So I'll give you an example of what that looks like. Let's say we have negative r over 3 is less than and equal to 6, all right? So we know that we want to get rid of the 3. And I'm going to make it a negative 3 just so we're not left with a negative r. So since we're dividing, I'll multiply both sides by negative 3. That cancels out. We're left with r is less than or equal to negative 3 times 6 would be negative 18. But because we multiplied both sides by a negative number, we need to flip our sign. Please don't forget that. That was something that a lot of people forgot when we were doing this chapter. So it's actually going to be r is greater than or equal to negative 18. So if I were to graph this, it's my 0. If I were to have negative 18, it's going to be a closed circle, and r is greater than. All right, I could do another one. Let's say that I have, let's do one with a fraction this time. Let's say I have negative 4 is greater than negative 4/3 s. All right, so I need to get rid of this negative 4/3. Right now I'm multiplying, right? So that means that I need to divide both sides by negative 4/3. Remember, when I divide a fraction, you just keep change, flip. We've done this. So that's gonna cancel out. So if we had 4, negative 4 divided by 4/3, that's gonna be the same as negative 4 over 1 times 3 over 4. All right, I'm gonna put that in parentheses. Is greater than s. Now we gotta figure out what this is. That's gonna be negative 12 over 4 is greater than s, and we know negative 12 over 4 is the same thing as negative 3 is greater than s. But remember, we divided a negative number, so we need to flip that sign. If you think you might forget, I might make a note. I forget who it was, but I know it was someone in 7B, so if it was you, kudos to you. But whenever they saw that there was a negative number they were going to have to divide or multiply, they would make a note by the question. So maybe like writing, make sure to change your sign as soon as you see the question. So by the time you're done and you think you've written your answer, you'll see a note there saying, oh, did I flip my sign? If you feel like you'll forget. So now all we have to do is graph, 0, negative 3, open circle, s is greater than. There you go. And our last lesson for this chapter was 4.7. This was one of the longer chapters we did. And this one was just two-step inequalities. You solve them the same way as two-step equations. You're just going to have to graph and remember if you need to change your sign. So we'll start out easy. We'll do some whole numbers. 3x plus 4 equals is greater than 16. So I want to solve for my x. So before I can touch the variable, I got to get rid of that 4. That leaves me with 3x is greater than 12. Divide both sides by 3 because I'm multiplying right now. That leaves me with x is greater than 4, right? Now, graph, open circle, x is greater than it. Cool. Let's do another one. Let's say I have z over negative 2, that's z, minus 6 is less than and equal to negative 2. Lots of negatives going on here. So, like I was saying before, you can notice right from the beginning of this problem that you're going to have to multiply a negative number here, so you can already know, maybe make a note for yourself, that you're going to have to flip your sign here at the end. But let's go ahead and start solving first. So get rid of the 6, left with z over 2. And then we also have a positive 4. Then we're going to have to multiply both sides by our negative 2 to cancel that out. Z is going to be less than or equal to negative 8. But again, flip your sign. So z is actually greater than or equal to negative 8. Put that on a number line. Close circle because it's equal to or greater than. There you go. And we'll do one last one with parentheses because we like those. Let's do 1/3 p plus 9 is less than or equal to positive 4. So remember, before we can solve anything, we have to distribute, get rid of those parentheses. Negative 1/3 p plus negative 1/3 times 9 would be 9 over 3, which is the same as 3. But because this was a negative and this was a positive, remember our sign here is going to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that because we should have a negative sign. All right, so now we're going to solve. Get rid of the negative 3. We're left with negative 1/3 p is less than or equal to 7, right? And then we're going to need to divide both sides by this negative 1/3. So again, remember, we divided by a negative, so we're going to have to flip our sign here at the end. So dividing a fraction, keep, change, flip. We're going to end up with p is less than or equal to 7 over 1 times negative 3 over 1, which is just p is less than or equal to negative 21. Flip your sign. P is greater than or equal to negative 21. And if I were to graph that, I'll put it on top because I'm running out of space. Negative 21, close circle, P is greater than. All right, so that is chapter 4.